Hello, welcome back to From Soft Serve. And as you may know by the title of this video, I'm working on a Bloodborne mod. And you might be wondering, well, why would you do that? It's only playable on PS4. And that is actually due to, well, here we're looking at Bloodborne's Central Yarnum in DS Map Studio, which is the same program I use for DS1. DS2, DS3, Sekiro, Elden Ring, it works with all of them. And it's had Bloodborne support for a long time. And there is a small Bloodborne modding scene because you can load mods onto like modded PS4s, right? My mod will not be for that, as my target is actually, with Bloodborne being playable on PC, we don't really know how soon, but this emulator here called Shad PS4. And you'll notice I have Bloodborne loaded. And it, not the version I have 0.1, it's very early. But 0.11 can actually boot Bloodborne without crashing, and it actually gets the character creation. It does not get in-game, like with loading your character or anything, but the progress is super quick. So quick, in fact, that I was kind of taken off guard by it, where I'm like, I should probably be working on a mod. Now, presumably there's issues that are going to come up with this, where modding Bloodborne is difficult, and any issues that are present modding the PS4 version, because it will be the PS4 version that's being emulated, obviously. So any issues with modding will carry over to playing it on PC because you're just emulating it. So we'll see. I've heard that, adding dynamic shadows and texture related things, it causes issues and it crashes the game. So, the mod might just go nowhere, but I feel like I should work on it anyway. And then when it's ready and when the game becomes playable, I'll see how it goes. If it doesn't work at all, luckily nothing is impossible with the Dark Souls modding community, and so they can likely find ways of bypassing things that causes crashes. And just like with Demon Souls on the PS3 emulator, RPCS3, it was limited to 30 FPS, but they were able to, it's essentially hex editing. And there's patches that you can apply for Demon Souls on RPCS3 to up the frame rate, right? Or turn off dynamic exposure, or turn off the anti-aliasing, and so you can modify the actual like eboot.bin file that gets used to boot the console game. And so, yeah, with Bloodborne's on a whole different level than Demon Souls, right? I think, yeah, Bloodborne is obviously like top tier important, and to get it running as best as possible, looking as best as possible on PC, I have no doubt that the modding community and people smarter than me will find ways past that. So I plan to work on a Bloodborne mod, partially just for fun, and it's inspiring for me. Like, we're in Central Yarnum right now, and the amount of geometric density beats Dark Souls 3 in many ways. Like, even on this ground, you can see, so you have your normal mapped surface, with your albedo map, normal map, giving a little bit of depth. And then they added, everything highlighted here is actual geometry. They added all these little bricks, and it makes such a difference when you're running around. Now, naturally, could they have relied on parallax occlusion mapping, which I've shown on this channel a lot? Sure, they can, but FromSoft just doesn't like parallax occlusion mapping. They used it, I think, twice in DS3, twice in DS2 from what I found, and that's it. I haven't found any in Sekiro. I haven't found any in Elden Ring thus far. I'm sure there's like one instance of it, but they rely on really good normal maps. But in Bloodborne, they just went hardcore with all the geometry that they were adding to, like, even this corner. Like, look at this fucking corner on this building. And they had all this geometry. Where instead they could have just had a really good normal map. They could have just had parallax occlusion mapping. They could have done other things, but they ended up actually modeling all of this. It's essentially what they did in DS1, but on a completely other, in another galaxy. It's so much better. Like DS1, there were little bricks on the ground. And so that's partially why, working on the Bloodborne mod, I'm already inspired so much by what I see here. And I do plan on taking like 1 or 2 textures from Bloodborne, and I can put them in my Dark Souls Remastered mod. Kind of like I did that with that one texture from Demon Souls as like a tribute. I can put in like one fitting Bloodborne texture somewhere. I already picked out one texture. I think I might have it pulled up. I might not. Yeah, Bloodborne textures. So it's this texture here in Central Yharnam. Because this texture actually looks pretty similar to something I saw in Dark Souls 1. But I should be able to use this somewhere. And even the normal map is actually a BC1 compression normal map, which I was a little surprised by. I thought I would see better compression, but it's actually the same compression that the Prepare to Die edition of DS1 uses, which is really old. So a little surprised by that. But Papa Guacamole, if we look in his arena, we can see, when you zoom in, you can see they literally modeled all of these little bricks. That's crazy. They could have just done like a blend texture and parallax occlusion mapping and a sick normal map. And that's commonly what they would do in Elden Ring, to be honest. But they literally modeled all these little bricks. It's crazy. It's so cool. I'm just so inspired by what they ended up doing with geometric density. Like, I don't, and even on this building, and they're also placed so well. Like, they are placed exceedingly well. Much better than DS1 ever did. A lot of their bricks didn't really correspond to the texture underneath, but these ones, they match like perfectly to the texture. Also, I might want to steal this texture because the normal map looks sick as hell. But yeah, they were just so much on the... So this up here looks like they didn't add geometry to this. This is more of your normal case, where it's just an actual texture, and they had just a good normal map on it. But I think back here, we'll see on the stairs, they went crazy with some of these stairs. Not these ones. These ones were fine. They had some good geometry on them, but they had better stairs. Yeah, like back here, they went nutty. So you can see the actual stairs underneath are just your flat. They didn't even bevel the edges, which surprisingly in DS1 they actually had beveled some of the edges on the stairs to give them a little bit more geometric complexity. But then you can see on top of it, or maybe, no, this might be an LOD. Oh, yeah. Oh, okay, so that might be an LOD model. Yeah, it is. Okay, so I take it back. Never mind. But that is what the more, that's what the distant model looks like, which is fair. So let's actually hide that. Oh my god, there's so many map pieces in Central Yharnam. It's crazy. The density on display in Central Yharnam, unbelievable. Okay, so there you go. We'll get rid of all the low detail models, because DS3 used that a lot. But yeah, look at these stairs. The whole thing. Look at all this geometric complexity. Oh my god, it's so cool. And then of course their actual, that's the other test, is did they actually model their actual fencing here instead of just using like a flat alpha texture, which looks like they did model it. Yeah, look at all this extra geo that they were adding. Ugh, it's so cool. But yeah, people on Twitter were really surprised, like, oh my god, how did you load it? How are you able to look at the maps? And it's like, oh no, I didn't mean it to come off like I'm the first one to load it into DS Map Studio. No, I mean, there's been Bloodborne modding for forever, years and years. So I'm not the first at all. I'm not going to be the best, but I'm really good at doing boring, repetitive tasks. And so will I go through and upscale every single Bloodborne model or every Bloodborne texture? Sure. Will it be usable? Not by a lot of people, but I think it could be a modder's resource, because actually that's the interesting thing about Dark Souls 3. So trivia, one of my main collaborators, and Moots, I guess as they call him on Twitter, she was telling me about, so we knew Dark Souls 3 did share some assets with Bloodborne. Obviously you can feel Bloodborne in Dark Souls 3 in many ways, but they are higher quality in Bloodborne, and they got downgraded for DS3, which is just really weird. You know, and obviously we know that Dark Souls 3 did go through a downgraded period, and so we didn't get the original. So yeah, if I actually disable every LOD model here, I should be able to get the real geometry. They used a shitload of fake models. That's crazy. And they're all like the 50,000 ones. That's how they denote. Oh my God. It's just crazy to see in a FromSoft game, you know, like bespoke models. It's crazy. It's so cool to see. Because a lot of this did not continue to DS3. But there's a decent chunk that did. You know, certain textures and certain things. But oh my God. I'm just so inspired by it. And so I wanted to make a video showing that I am working on it. Oh, actually. What do we got here? Oh, okay. So a little bit of geo, and then it looks like they were doing the, so this looks like DS2 style. And I think it'll actually be parallax if we go in the game, because I've seen this method of like, it's almost like they're stamping on like this little sticker for each brick, and it actually doesn't look that good. It was a really bad method of parallax, or whatever displacement they were using. Okay, do we have a beveled edge? Yes, we have a beveled edge. And there's even a little bit more added detail above what like DS1 would do. And then, ooh, is this just an alpha texture? Yes. So here they did not actually model the bars. Interesting. So I'm just learning a lot by flying around the Bloodborne maps, and I have yet to really touch or scratch the surface of it. I've just gone to like, wait, is this a LOD model? Yeah, 50. Okay, let me get rid of, oh my God. Yeah, you can see underneath all of these, they were being hidden by the low quality variant. So let's see. Yeah, okay, so these ones are actually floating out here. There is no higher quality variant. Now, here's, how did they do their distant mountains? Okay. Yeah, so there's a little bit of geo back here, and it's far enough away. Yeah, so they did actually do some 3D models versus what DS2 did, which were just like flat images. Okay, and these skyboxes, yeah, they actually put like clouds and like a lot of different cloud cards, I guess you would call them. Ooh, yeah, okay, don't look at that. That's where it got a little rough. So that one's, I think, an actual distant model. So that's kind of what you have to discern of like which one is an actual distant model. And it looks like they generally code them up here as 50,000. Anything in the 50,000 range is a low quality variant, and you'll get a high quality variant. But 8010, I believe this is an actual one that they stick here. And not all of these may end up being used in game, depending on how the draw groups are, as they may have gone higher quality on certain things, but then they just didn't end up using it. The trees are pretty decent quality. I'd say they're slightly better than like DS1 trees. Nothing too crazy there. One cool thing that I can do is, so I do have Blender pulled up. So the Blender Soulstruct for Blender plugin does actually support Bloodborne. Currently you cannot export the models, but you can look at them. And that alone is pretty cool, personally. They, of course, future support will be added for many things. But it's honestly, for me, it's cool enough just to look at the models. Like, look at these bricks. Oh my God, it's so cool. And apparently the Chalice dungeons are like super geometrically dense. Trivia was telling me about that this morning. And I was like, that is really cool. Because admittedly, the Chalice dungeons are like completely contained and you teleport to them. So they don't need to do like distant models. They don't need to do like a skybox. So I guess they went absolutely nuts with it. Yeah, let's open up another model. I don't really know which one immediately to pull up. So you're kind of funny because you'll just pull them up randomly. Okay, interesting. That's a good model. There's so many models in here, and it's just kind of fun to play around with them. What I'm doing with DS1 is generally, I'm working on a new update to DSRR, which adds like really smart, smooth shading to the normals on a lot of the models, so they end up looking more geometrically dense than they actually are. It just makes the actual like edges a lot less noticeable, which in DS1 is specifically an issue, as it was a PS3 360 era game when they were modeling this stuff. Here, I think in Bloodborne, you don't nearly, yeah, because you can use the set smooth custom normals, and you'll see it does actually change it a little bit. Slightly more intelligent smoothing. So I certainly want to apply that to every single Bloodborne model, and I'm doing that to DS3 currently, or DS1, and you have to load every single model, apply that, export it, fix anything else that you see, and while I'm doing that, I'm also going to the Material tab here, and this is where you can see what MTD setup they actually gave each thing. And so for DS1, there's a decent number of surfaces, which I've fixed most of them, where they were not given bump mapping, even though they had a normal map created. That was the big benefit to Dark Souls Remastered, was that they gave a normal map to every single surface in the game. Where Prepare to Die Edition, there were a shitload of surfaces that had no normal map, no specular map, because they were essentially from the, you know, Demon Souls era of density and texturing. But there's a decent number where they just didn't turn on the bump mapping, so they weren't utilizing the normal map. So I'm fixing that while I'm going through it. That's a big part of the DSRR mod. But man, the density of Bloodborne here, to be honest, it's not really that far off Elden Ring. When I've been flying around Elden Ring obviously has a certain scope to it, and how it's open world, and they had to handle the assets of the giant open world and doing that intelligently, and how far in the distance, and you know, they couldn't rely on how here you can see when you zoom out of Central Yharnam, obviously they just did like mountains out here, and like that's kind of it. And then they could do, you know, a little skybox and like fake meshes here and there. Elden Ring obviously had to go to like a whole different level, but in terms of like the walking around in the levels, Elden Ring obviously has a much better PBR setup. They have volumetric lighting. They have a lot, but the base like core technology is the same in terms of geometric density. Texture quality obviously went up in Elden Ring, but not as high as you would think. It did not, you know, increase as much as you might think. I'm curious in Bloodborne how many of them were given because each texture in Bloodborne, at least from what I've seen thus far, just like DS3 and like the Prepare to Die edition of DS1, they have a low quality variant of almost every texture. And so they can use that to save performance, depending on which model they choose to give that low quality one. But as I noticed in the Prepare to Die edition, and specifically Remastered forgot to undo that. Like Remastered deleted most of the low quality variant textures for DS1 because they weren't needed anymore. But in some of the actual model files, it was only a handful thus far, where they forgot to switch over to the high quality variant texture for some reason. So I fixed that. But in terms of actual like density, this beats out DS3 sometimes. DS3 wins sometimes as well. But genuinely, okay, so this one is also an LOD mod or model. Yeah, okay. So that's kind of, I think you mostly could hide every one of these 50,000 ones, and you might be able to get to the real. But like the actual density of Central Yharnam is bananas. And apparently Miyazaki himself is the one who created the layout. So I believe this is the LOD model for Bloodstarved Beast, right? BSB. Because, yeah, you can kind of see that's the same pillars. And then, yeah, whenever you actually load in there. But, yeah, it's very DS3 style, which actually follows from DS2 in how you can notice the point lights are actual, like, geometric objects you can look at and then move. And then in DS1, it was a completely different setup, and you had to, like, create a region point, and then you had to create a separate light and an SFX. And here you can kind of have your point lights, and you can see how big they are actually reflected in the world. So it's very DS2 style. Bloodborne also continued the usage of the filters. And that's how they controlled like what area, you know, how each area looked like, and the shadow rendering and the ambient occlusion, and all of those were handled in the filter params, which ended up being called G params for Bloodborne and DS3. But they're essentially an XML file that you can control all of that stuff with instead of a bunch of different param files, which is what DS1 uses and DES. And so, yeah, anyway, that's a bunch of rambling. But yeah, in the future, I'll be able to edit Bloodborne models and then save them. If there's any mesh errors or mesh holes, as you know, I'm really good at finding those. It's hard for me not to see those. So one thing I'll be doing, I do need your help. I have added a goal to my Ko-fi page for a PS4. Not a specifically modded one or anything special like that. Not even a PS4 Pro. Just a regular PS4. Because I was borrowing my brother's PS4 when I was playing Bloodborne last year. So I don't actually have that anymore. So I am in need of a PS4 because I want to be playing Bloodborne a lot, which obviously benefits me. I do want to actually stream it as well. I need to get a capture card then, actually. But future stuff. But mostly I want to play Bloodborne like on repeat, alongside my DS1 work, of course. And look for draw group issues, look for mesh holes, so at least I can note them and potentially fix them. Problem is I can't save the models yet, but that'll come in the future. But as long as I can note where they're at and what to fix, that's still going to be prep work that is useful for a Bloodborne mod. And, you know, fixing that kind of stuff. And then looking for textures that are particularly low resolution. I don't think every texture will need to be upscaled. We might need to look at how high resolution they're actually being displayed in game, but that's a later problem, or their scaling. But yeah, I'm going to be looking at asset quality, and so I'll be going over Bloodborne with a fine-tooth comb. So I'll have that linked in the description if anyone would want to help. You certainly don't have to, and don't feel pressured to. If you happen to have a rich uncle, or you're living off the inheritance from a great-grandfather who was an oil baron, and you happen to have a lot of extra money, then, you know, feel free, and that'll be cool. I also have a Patreon and all that jazz. Yeah, so hopefully you enjoyed this rambly video of Bloodborne and my absolute love of it. I hope you can tell from me talking about it that I just absolutely adore Bloodborne. It's the next project that gives me that same sort of like DS1 feeling, because I've been able to mod DS1 for like 1,500 plus hours, and I still love it, and I still really am excited to work on it. Bloodborne, I think, is one of the other ones that's like that. Demon Souls doesn't quite hit that level for me. DS3 does not hit that level for me. I love those games, but I don't love them on the same level as Bloodborne and DS1. And DS2 is higher than DS3 or Demon Souls for me. DS2 modding is obviously where I got my start. But even then, I think Bloodborne beats that. Bloodborne is just one of these super special, once-in-a-generation, once-in-a-lifetime games that if I can have any role in enhancing it for people to play it on PC in any way possible. Also, I'll have a link in the description to the Shad PS4 emulator. So that way you can follow them on Twitter for updates on it. And if you can, I'm sure they have links to support them in some way with this development. Because honestly, there's multiple PS4 emulators being worked on right now. The PS3 emulator people are working on a PS4 one, so that's promising. But Shad PS4 has had the most progress, and it's going insanely quickly. And so I'm so excited that we could have a Bloodborne playable on PC. Maybe not well, but it could be playable next year. We'll see some progress by the end of this year. I'm so excited by it. So anyway, let me know your thoughts on Bloodborne, and are you excited to play it on PC? Are you excited for mods of it, more mods of it? Because obviously there's already mods for it. But, yeah, let me know. And I'll see you in the next video.